On Atkins and Guidry specifically, obviously, anytime you can add two guys that were coordinators just the year before at high level programs. I know that Florida State didn't have a great year and struggled a lot in 2024. But Lance Guidry, and I know Miami's defense too. But when you add them to, they both took lower roles, right?
Right.
And not are controlling things, but you're still adding a ton of experience there and a ton of. I mean, it's Saban-esque, and this is not just everybody's kind of doing this now, right? Like adding guys as analysts, so it's not like, oh wow, you added a guy as an analyst. Like this is what is happening in college football now, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you added two guys that were coordinators at very high level programs that have seen a lot of success into your program to help. I do think that's a big deal. How much does it impact things overall? I don't know, but it's just another cog in the wheel. It's not just one thing. Like the hiring of Lance Guidry or Alex Atkins isn't taking LSU from 8-4 to 10-2, but it is one more thing to add to it.
Well, I call the analysts, now that people who don't know, analysts can be on the field coaching, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, that's the Nick Saban rule. If they would have let Nick do that, then
they'd have never lost a game.
They would have never lost a game, right? Right. So I think this is what I've equated it to, and I don't care what anybody tells me. LSU stealing positions for coaches. TJ, this Lance Guidry contract's going to come out.
It ain't an analyst. It ain't an analyst salary. It ain't what they pay me to be an analyst.
There's going to be a base pay. Okay, that looks like an analyst. Listen to me. Same with Alex Atkins in some regards, but they could do it a little bit more open because he's on field. But Lance Guidry, they're not asking him to be the DC. But number two, Blake Baker's bringing him in. Like this move does not get made without Blake Baker, a guy that has Louisiana ties. You need safety help. He's coached safeties. He's the head coach of McNeese. He's the DC at my alma mater in Southeastern. He's always been around safeties. I know Lance very well. Now that you move Harold Perkins to that star role or the big linebacker slot, you can have Jake Olson, their safeties coach, in the back end, and he doesn't have to worry about the star position. Put Lance Guidry there with Harold Perkins. I do think that it's twofold. Blake Baker has someone he can talk to, like, hey, what are you seeing up there? Yada, 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 yada. They had the same philosophy. They run the same defense, by the way, just ironically. Both of them were DCs in Miami. But you now have a safeties coach who has had immense amount of highly unrecruited talent that's gone into the league at safety, these lower Louisiana programs. You're probably moving Harold Perkins to that star role out of the inside of more of what Perkins did in 2023, and Lance Guidry is going to be there. By the way, every source that I've talked to, all of them love Lance. Nobody hates Lance Guidry. Sorry. Anybody that's had a conversation with him, nobody hates him. He's a great mind. I think things were different at Miami from a personnel standpoint. That's a whole different conversation. You're asking him to coach up Harold Perkins, right? Like that's basically what you're hiring him to do. But if things continue to stay so bad at safety, you can move out Jake Olson and hire Lance Guidry. You're going to have to now convince me how big of that's not a massive steal. It is a massive steal. And Brian Kelly, I'll say this, to his credit, especially with the Lance Guidry, and I'll get to Alex Atkins in a minute, but to Lance Guidry specifically, since that Bryce Underwood debacle, you're going to have to start convincing me that things have not been starting to change around LSU from a coaching staff and from just Brian Kelly. Look, I got to give credit where credit's due. A lot of people talk crap about him for whatever reason. My dog's been out there moving and shaking and recruiting. I heard from Notre Dame people he will not go out there and recruit. Somebody forgot to tell him. TJ, I think he's pissed off, if I'm being honest with you. It's a little bit – he's never been like this is what I'm trying to say. Never. And I think that a couple of things happen with that. Pressure, as we alluded to just a minute ago, getting to the playoff. But I think, man, that this is a part of his legacy. Dude, all of these head coaches are alpha male legacy guys who want their legacy to be what it is. He's spent his entire life in college coaching. You mean to tell me he doesn't want to get one? Get out of my face with that. You're an idiot if you believe that. But The interesting thing, not about just Lance Guidry, was Alex Atkins. And I know that you know a lot more about me from a personal standpoint about Alex. Midway through the year, the Florida game on, LSU and Brian Kelly had to get involved in the running game. They bring Alex Atkins in as a tight ends coach, but mainly the run game coordinator. TJ, I know that Florida State fans can look at this a certain way, but LSU fans look at it as a massive positive because outside of Jaden Daniels, they have not had a hope at running the football. So I think that there's a couple of things here. By the way, the tight end room that he has, I don't know if anybody understands what's going on at LSU at tight end right now. They literally, their lead tight end in a basketball game against Alabama blocked a shot, a three-point shot, went down the court like he's LeBron, yeet it, okay? And like, dude, everybody's like, hold that's a tight end. So not only from a receiving standpoint, which I think he's going to bring an analyst in to help him with the receiving game of that, but all three of them, Donovan Green, Bauer Sharp, Trey'Dez Green, TJ, they're not good at the end line of scrimmage. So every single box that you have for these hires, you're checking. And then here's another thing. Every coach that LSU has massive Louisiana ties. The last time that this happened, that happened. Every coach having Louisiana. I know that it sounds weird. Every national championship that LSU's gone on had one thing in common. All coaches had massive Louisiana ties. So they are going back to the roots of what made LSU successful in recruiting, what made it successful on field. That has been a massive thing. Now, Alex Atkins, I don't know yet, TJ. I've heard rumblings of this, but I don't know this to be fact. I don't know if he calls run plays, but I feel like that counter that y'all ran at Florida State a lot, pulling, is going to be a lot of what LSU does. They got to get back and get better in the running game, minus Jaden Daniels, because if they don't, they're not going anywhere. LSU was 104th in the country in rushing, 104. TJ, I never thought, if you would have told me 5 years ago that LSU couldn't run the football, I'd say you're a damn fool. Now, if you would have told me that you had two Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks in the last 5 years, I'd also call you a damn fool. But there just comes a point in time where I look at this and say, listen, you don't understand how bad things got where Brian Kelly had to inject himself in the running game, which, by the way, they got drastically better. They physically abused an Oklahoma team that physically dominated Bama. So I think Brian Kelly should have gotten involved sooner, but I think Alex Atkins' role is only this. How are we going to implement the running game? Because our OCs and Joe Sloan and Cortez Sankton come from a more air raid style of principle. It's not their strength. So I think that you're adding and checking off boxes of what you believe that your staff and your team needs. I know that's a long-winded answer, but man, it's so deep and complex to what I think that they've done here to try to get better in the long term.
Yeah, and I do agree. I think, Florida State wasn't good in any facet of the game. That's not true. They were good kicking and punting. They had a guy up for the Groza and the Ray guy, but that doesn't win you a lot of games. They were so bad everywhere. And at their height, right, when they won 23 games in 2 years, LSU fans are very familiar with Florida State from 22 and 23. They were a really good running team. I think they ran the counter 69%, a nice percentage, against Miami. And they asked Alex, like, why'd you keep running it? And he was like, they didn't stop it once. If they had stopped it, we'd have gone to something else, But they ran that counter over and over and over again. I think Trey Benson had three rushing touchdowns in every game he played against Florida and Miami, minus one of them, right? And he had two in that one. So yeah, or no, I think he had three in all of them. So yeah, they were really good. Last year being the anomaly, they didn't have guards that could pull, right? And so
they got it at LSU.
If your game is based on a guard that can pull, it wrecks that whole thing, right? Like it just And so does Alex deserve some blame for that? Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint. But the philosophy, the scheme didn't just change, right? Like he didn't just say like, hey, this has worked really well for 2 years. Let's just change it up and try something different. No, they were trying to do it. Now, again, is there blame to be assigned for the level of offensive lineman that was there because he was the O-line coach? Sure. But from a running perspective, from a scheme perspective, I do think that that's where it's a plus. And obviously, Alex
Right.
is not going to be asked to be the elite offensive line recruiter that is needed, right? Like they've
No.
got guys in place. So I do think it's an overall positive. Now, proof will be in the pudding, right? Like we've seen things. It's like a YouTube video. The things you think are going to hit flop, and the things that you think are going to flop go crazy. Sometimes that happens in coaching. So we'll find out. We'll find out early this year. We're talking about the schedule in a minute. But yeah, we're going to find out real quick if it works or not, and if that improvement comes. You're right. LSU was so one-dimensional last year. Like you just knew it had to be Nuss every game winning for
Right.
LSU. And shoot, it was frustrating as a Florida State fan watching you guys play in the swamp. And I'm like, just run the ball a little bit. Just run the ball a little bit and you'll win this game. And it was just like, nope, that they just don't have it. And it was really most of the game.
With that O-line.
We talked about it before the A&M game. If they can just run a little bit, they'll win at A&M. Couldn't run. Like it's just it was just the symptom all year of and so yeah, I mean Atkins could certainly help improve that.
Well, and we're not. Here's the beautiful thing about Brad Davis, the O-line coach, and Alex Atkins. What do both of them have weaknesses in? I'm not saying Alex has a weakness in recruiting. I do think that you can make the argument that the philosophy of Florida State, how they attack the portal versus high school, is completely different the way that Brian Kelly is going to make Alex Atkins recruit, right? I mean, like, that's a different topic for a different day. Brad Davis needs scheme. They need scheme. They need somebody that can come in there and do that. Brian Kelly saw him twice and said, you know what, man, he kicked my ass, and I kind of want to do this. Now, they've recruited. If you look at LSU recruiting, TJ, nobody's had, from a blue chip ratio standpoint, nobody's recruited better than LSU. No one. The problem has been, I don't think that they have the run game system, right, to be able to implement. You're asking a 345-pound guard to pull or do something. It's not his strength. You need to line up and run the football, and 4 yards is 4 yards. And then you go to a Senior Bowl, and your right tackle moves to right guard, has massive success. Your right guard moves to right tackle and has massive success. They were both playing out of position. Like, that's the part where Alex comes in here and says, listen, I just need you to develop and recruit, and then I'm going to come in here and do the rest. That is the part where I talk about the checkbox, right? Like, that's a checked box. You have two elite O-line guys that specialize in two specifically different things. Now, you're right about the running game, man. Look, it's one thing about Jaden Daniels in this aspect. You get away from it because of who he is.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean, you're not telling Jaden Daniels, like, instead of pulling it and throwing it, which he did a lot to Malik Neighbors, for crying out loud, okay? That's a different aspect of what you don't have that right now with Garrett. And if things go bad, Jaden did things differently. I feel like a lot of times last year that they tried to implement a lot of that, okay, in a lot of different aspects where Jaden just bailed them out of it. Now it's not just the tight end and O-line run game. Now you're going to have to decide what you take away from LSU, because I think that they're going to go a little bit of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Listen, we'll go 2-3 yards per pop, and we'll take the ball away from you. But TJ, I will mention this though. What they've done at receiver and the speed that they have there is going to be interesting. Do you play 2 high? Do you play 1 high? Do you walk a safety down the box? That is the more interesting thing that I look at. Now, they got to just run the football. TJ, I've made this very well known on Ruffino and Joe show from a national perspective. Name the teams the last 10 years that have won national titles. What do they all have in common? They have one massive thing in common. And I'll even throw a team that didn't win it, but I look at Florida State. What did they have in common? Defensively, they were really good. Offensively, they ran the football in a top 25 aspect. Everybody wants to say college football has changed and we're moving to a passing game. Bullshit. Georgia, LSU, Alabama, name the team, Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, yeah, they had freaks, but they were the number 1 defense in the country, and they physically abused the number 2 rushing attack defensively in the country in Notre Dame. Yeah. Like, what are we trying? We're trying to make this game more different than what it is. Play good defense and dominate in running the football. That is how you win football games, and I think that's where they're trying to go.